People often hear a single line and feel a jolt in their chest before they even understand it. The Prophet David fasted all his life. It sounds overwhelming, almost impossible, and it immediately raises a question that refuses to leave the mind. How could a man chosen by Allah, a king with armies, responsibilities, battles, judgments, and a nation depending on him, live in a state of constant hunger? Was this a form of self-punishment? Or was there something hidden behind this statement that most people never stop to examine? That tension, that curiosity, is exactly where the story begins, because the truth behind it is far more profound than the phrase suggests. Before we go any further, thank you for watching Islamic Insight. From which country are you watching this video? And if you love learning about Islam, its prophets, and the wisdom behind their lives, subscribe to this channel so we can continue this journey together. Now here is where clarity matters, because Islamic tradition is precise, not exaggerated. The Quran and authentic Hadith do not describe Prophet Dawud as someone who starved himself every single day of his life. The Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, explained this matter with remarkable balance and wisdom. He said that the most beloved fasting to Allah is the fasting of Dawud, and then he defined it clearly. He would fast one day and break his fast the next. Day after day, year after year, this rhythm continued so consistently that it became known as a lifetime of fasting, even though it never crossed into excess. This detail is critical because Islam never praises self-destruction or constant deprivation. Instead, it praises discipline that can be carried with strength, clarity, and stability. Dawud did not fast to escape life. He fasted while fully carrying the weight of life on his shoulders. What makes this even more remarkable is the status of the man himself. Prophet Dawud was not an ordinary worshipper seeking isolation or retreat. He was a prophet chosen by Allah, a king granted authority, a judge entrusted with justice, and a warrior who led his people. His life was filled with power and responsibility, the very things that often make people forget their dependence on Allah. Yet through this pattern of fasting, he kept his heart anchored. One day of hunger humbled him and reminded him that strength does not come from food, wealth, or authority alone. The next day of nourishment restored his body so that he could rule, judge, and fight without weakness. This balance was not accidental. It was intentional, divinely aligned, and deeply loved by Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, did not describe this fast as good or recommended in a casual way. He elevated it above all other voluntary fasting and called it the most beloved to Allah. That statement alone should make us pause. In a religion rich with acts of worship, full of optional fasts and nights of prayer, this one pattern stood above the rest. Why? Because it reflected complete submission without excess, devotion without burnout, and consistency without pride. Dawud did not fast based on emotion or spiritual highs. He fasted with steadiness, whether he felt strong or tired, victorious or burdened. That is why this form of worship reached such a high rank. It was not dramatic, but it was relentless in sincerity. This is also where the story quietly challenges modern assumptions about worship. Many people believe that the most extreme action must be the most rewarding. Islam gently corrects that thinking. The fast of Dawud shows that Allah loves what can be sustained, what reshapes the soul over time, and what keeps a servant grounded rather than broken. Prophet Dawud lived a life of authority without arrogance, strength without indulgence, and devotion without isolation. His fasting was not meant to make him famous or admired. It was meant to keep him small before Allah, even while the world saw him as great. To understand why the fasting of Prophet Dawud carried such weight, you have to look closely at the kind of life he lived. This was not a man removed from the pressures of the world. He was surrounded by power every single day. He commanded armies, ruled over people with real disputes and real suffering, and carried the responsibility of judgment, where one wrong decision could change lives. Power has a way of feeding the ego, of convincing a person that they are self-sufficient, untouchable, above accountability. Yet Prophet Dawud lived in a constant state of inner restraint. Fasting every other day was not about hunger alone. It was about governing his desires before governing his kingdom. When the body is hungry, the soul becomes honest. Pride softens, impulses slow down. Decisions are weighed more carefully. For a king, this discipline was protection. It kept him from tyranny, from indulgence, from losing himself in the authority Allah had given him. His fasting was a private act of submission that balanced a very public position of power, reminding him again and again that no crown places a servant above Allah. This is one of the most overlooked dimensions of his worship. Many people imagine that intense devotion belongs to those with simple lives, free from responsibility. He fasted while ruling, while judging, while leading. He did not wait for quiet moments or perfect conditions. His devotion lived inside the chaos of leadership. That is precisely why his fast was so beloved to Allah. It was not escape, it was engagement with the world while remaining internally anchored to the Creator. Hunger taught him patience with people. Restraint taught him justice in judgment. Self-control taught him humility when praised and gratitude when victorious. The fast did not weaken him, it refined him. Islam consistently teaches that worship is not meant to crush the human being. There is no virtue in destroying the body in the name of devotion. The life of Prophet Dawud stands as one of the clearest proofs of this principle. Fasting every other day created a rhythm that honored both the soul and the body. One day of restraint, one day of nourishment. One day of hunger that reminded him of dependence. One day of strength that allowed him to fulfill his duties. This balance is not coincidence, it is mercy. Allah did not ask him to live in constant deprivation, and he did not impose it on himself either. The wisdom of this fast lies in its sustainability. It could be carried for decades without breaking the body or corrupting intention. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, emphasized this point when companions attempted to go beyond it. Some wanted to fast every day, believing more hardship meant more reward. The Prophet stopped them, teaching that no voluntary fast surpasses the fast of Dawud. That statement quietly redefines how Islam measures excellence. The best worship is not the most painful. It is the most balanced, the most sincere, the most consistent. Extremes often burn bright and fade quickly. Balance endures. Prophet Dawud did not rush toward Allah in bursts of emotion. He walked steadily toward him for a lifetime. This steadiness is what transformed fasting into strength rather than weakness. Hunger sharpened awareness. It trained patience in moments of anger and restraint in moments of temptation. When a person fasts regularly, the body learns discipline and the soul learns command. Prophet Dawud did not allow appetite to rule him. He decided when to eat and when to refrain, and that control spilled into every other area of his life. A man who can command his desires can command his actions. A ruler who can restrain himself can rule others with fairness. His fasting was not separate from his leadership, it was the foundation of it. There is also a deeper psychological wisdom here. Consistent fasting creates humility without humiliation. It keeps the heart soft, without making the person weak. Prophet Dawud stood strong in battle and gentle in worship. He carried authority without arrogance and devotion without display. His hunger was quiet, his discipline was private. There was no performance in it. That sincerity is what gave his fasting such weight with Allah. It was not done to be seen, praised, or remembered. It was done because he understood the danger of comfort and the safety of restraint. For those who reflect carefully, the fast of Prophet Dawud sends a message that reaches far beyond food. It teaches that power requires accountability, that leadership demands inner discipline, and that spiritual strength is built through steady habits, not dramatic gestures. It shows that the body is not an enemy to be punished, but a trust to be managed wisely. Prophet Dawud honored that trust while keeping his soul constantly alert. His fast did not remove him from the world. It allowed him to live in it without being consumed by it. And that is why, centuries later, his fasting is still held up as the most beloved example of voluntary worship in Islam. When fasting becomes a lifelong rhythm rather than an occasional effort, it changes the inner world of a person in ways that are difficult to describe but easy to feel. For Prophet Dawud, fasting every other day meant that awareness of Allah never drifted far from his heart. Hunger has a way of sharpening the senses, not only physically but spiritually. It slows the rush of the world and forces a person to listen inwardly. Every fasting day was a quiet reminder that life itself is fragile, that strength fades, and that dependence on Allah is not symbolic but real. This constant return to awareness kept his heart awake. He did not need rare moments of spiritual intensity because his worship was woven into the fabric of daily life. When the body experiences hunger regularly, gratitude deepens naturally. Food is no longer routine or taken for granted. Strength feels like a gift rather than an entitlement. That awareness carries into prayer, into judgment, into leadership. Prophet Dawud lived with a heart that was trained to remember Allah in both deprivation and comfort. One day of hunger softened the soul and reminded him of need. One day of nourishment restored the body and reminded him of gratitude. This cycle prevented spiritual negligence. There was no long stretch of indulgence that could dull his conscience, and no prolonged hardship that could harden his heart. His worship kept him awake without exhausting him, present without overwhelming him, humble without breaking him. That is the quiet genius of this form of fasting. It does not shock the soul, it trains it gently, repeatedly, until remembrance becomes second nature. This is precisely why Allah loved this fast so deeply. It was not fueled by emotional highs or moments of spiritual urgency. It was fueled by consistency, intention, and self-knowledge. Many acts of worship begin with enthusiasm, but fade when difficulty appears. The fast of Dawud required no dramatic resolve, only steady commitment. It did not rely on sudden bursts of motivation. It relied on character. Allah loves deeds that continue, even if they are small, because they reflect sincerity rather than performance. Prophet Dawud did not fast to prove anything to himself or to others. He fasted because he understood the soul. He understood that power without restraint is dangerous, that comfort without discipline breeds heedlessness, and that leadership without humility invites corruption. His fasting protected him from these dangers quietly, without spectacle. That is why it reached such a high rank. It was worship that shaped the man rather than displaying the man. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, spoke of this fast, he did so with admiration and clarity. He described it as the most beloved fasting to Allah, placing it above all other voluntary fasts. This was not a suggestion for everyone to copy mechanically. It was a declaration of a principle. The best worship is the one that aligns the soul, the body, and responsibility in harmony. Allah does not seek exhaustion from his servants. He seeks sincerity, balance, and perseverance. This principle becomes even clearer when the Prophet Muhammad corrected those who tried to exceed this level. Some companions, driven by intense love and eagerness, wanted to fast every day without rest. From the outside, it looked like devotion, but the Prophet did not approve it. He redirected them firmly and gently, teaching that there is no fast better than the fast of Dawud. That moment carries immense wisdom. It tells us that worship is not a competition of hardship. More difficulty does not automatically mean more closeness to Allah. When worship turns into self-punishment, it loses its purity. The Prophet was protecting his companions from imbalance, from burnout, and from misunderstanding the nature of devotion. He wanted them to live fully, worship sincerely, and remain strong in body and soul. The fast of Dawud represents the highest form of voluntary discipline because it leaves room for life. It allows a person to fulfill duties, care for others, work, lead, and still worship at a high level. It acknowledges human limits without lowering spiritual ambition. Prophet Dawud embodied that balance perfectly. His fasting did not isolate him from his people or weaken his leadership. It strengthened his justice, deepened his humility, and kept his heart constantly connected to Allah. That is why his example stands as a timeless lesson. Not every believer is meant to fast like Dawud, but every believer is meant to understand why his fast was loved. It teaches that Allah values steady devotion over dramatic extremes, awareness over appearance, and balance over burnout. There is a quiet lesson embedded in the fasting of Prophet Dawud that speaks directly to every generation, especially those who believe that faith must always be loud, intense, or dramatic to be real. His life teaches that the deepest transformations often happen silently, through habits that shape the soul day by day. The fast of Dawud was not designed to impress anyone or to stand out in public. It was a private contract between a servant and his Lord. That is why its impact lasted a lifetime. Islam repeatedly draws attention to the idea that Allah loves deeds that are consistent, even if they appear small in the eyes of people. Prophet Dawud lived this truth. He did not chase spiritual excitement or push himself into extremes that would eventually collapse. Instead, he chose a path that could be walked steadily, no matter the circumstances. That path trained his heart to show up for Allah again and again, without needing constant inspiration. This is the kind of worship that survives hardship, success, exhaustion, and comfort. It does not depend on mood, it depends on commitment. In a world where people often start strong and fade quickly, the example of Prophet Dawud feels almost foreign. Many believers experience bursts of devotion, followed by long periods of neglect, not because they lack sincerity, but because they misunderstand how spiritual growth works. Dawud understood that the soul, like the body, needs rhythm. One day of hunger softened him and reminded him of his need for Allah. One day of nourishment restored his strength so he could serve Allah through leadership, justice, and responsibility. This pattern protected him from spiritual arrogance on one side and spiritual despair on the other. It taught him to live between fear and hope, effort and mercy. This is why his fasting was not just an act of worship, but a system of self-regulation. It kept him emotionally balanced, spiritually alert, and morally grounded. The lesson for the wider community is clear. Faith that lasts is faith that is structured wisely. It does not demand more than a person can sustain, and it does not settle for neglect either. When reflecting on why Prophet Dawud fasted in this way, it becomes clear that reward alone was not the goal. His fasting was not transactional. It was transformational. He did not fast to accumulate points or to compete for rank. He fasted to remain a servant, even while living as a king. Power has a way of distorting perspective. It can make a person feel untouchable, self-made, above correction. Dawud used fasting as a safeguard against that illusion. Hunger reminded him that his strength was borrowed. Restraint reminded him that control begins within. Every fasting day quietly stripped away the false sense of permanence that comes with authority and success. It returned him to the truth of servitude. This is why his fasting carried sincerity. It was not a display of piety, it was an anchor of humility. Even when people praised him, even when victories surrounded him, even when judgment rested in his hands, his fasting whispered the same truth to his heart. You are a servant before you are a king. This perspective also explains why his fasting never became harsh or self-destructive. He understood that Allah did not need his suffering. Allah wanted his obedience, his awareness, and his humility. The day he broke his fast was just as meaningful as the day he fasted, because it reflected obedience to balance, not indulgence. Eating with gratitude is also worship. Restoring strength to fulfill responsibility is also worship. Prophet Dawud did not romanticize hunger, nor did he fear comfort. He navigated both with consciousness of Allah. That is what made his worship complete. His fast trained his soul, and his nourishment equipped his body. Together, they allowed him to live fully, without becoming enslaved to desire or crushed by discipline. This harmony is at the heart of Islamic spirituality. For those listening to this story today, the life of Prophet Dawud offers a corrective lens. It reminds us that we are not asked to imitate prophets mechanically, but to understand the wisdom behind their actions. Not everyone is meant to fast like Dawud, and Islam does not demand it. What Islam asks is that believers learn from his intention and his balance. The goal is not to exhaust the body, nor to neglect the soul. The goal is to build a relationship with Allah that can endure decades, not weeks. The fast of Dawud teaches that sustainable worship shapes character over time. It molds patience, humility, gratitude, and self-control quietly, without spectacle. It creates servants who remain steady in both hardship and ease. In the end, Prophet Dawud did not fast his life away. He fasted away arrogance, heedlessness, and excess. He used fasting as a tool to remain human in the face of power and sincere in the face of praise. His example stands as a reminder that the most beloved worship in Islam is not the loudest or the harshest, but the one that keeps the heart alive and the servant grounded until the end of life. This is why his fast became a standard, not because it was dramatic, but because it was wise. And wisdom, when practiced consistently, leaves a mark that time cannot erase.